You have a startup, you are an entrepreneur, you have a company, or you have even more responsibilities you need to take care of in the company and just throughout the day. So we're going to be talking about the best productivity hacks you can use as an entrepreneur. The most important thing is to keep a detailed schedule, and you need to plan the night before, plan the perfect day you want to have, hour by hour or even minute by minute, and just try to stick to it as much as possible. And you don't really have to stick to it perfectly, just try to do as much things as possible on that schedule. Work in a clean, well-lit environment that allows you to stay productive. So that's why working at home really sucks, or working at the dinner table, or working where you watch films or eat. It's too much distractions. You are not associating that place with productivity, and your brain can start wandering. It's better if you have a specific table, or even better, a specific room where you can work uninterruptedly. So stop checking your emails all the time. Instead, space out specific times of the day where you check those emails, where you respond to your messages or any kind of stuff. You can also use like a Pomodoro technique, which is like a very popular productivity hack where you divide like 25 minutes for specific work, and then you take 5 minute break, and then again you take 25 minutes for work, and then on and on and on. And that is actually really cool thing, because you kind of taking the rest, and yes, you still kind of stay productive, because if you don't take the breaks, your focus kind of like drops until like you're not really focused and you're not productive at all. But instead, you can keep those peaks up and up when you take those little 5 minute breaks. And in the company, one of the most unproductive things you can do is to have a bunch of meetings that are literally unnecessary. When you have company meetings, it doesn't mean that you're working. Yes, you still need to have like meetings, like to progress and like to have presentations progress, but try to keep them as minimum as possible. Avoid like anything unnecessary. Don't make people come to the meetings if they are not necessary to be there, if they are not the primary contributors. Stop meeting that much, but instead just work. And another cool hack you can use in the workplace is to set concrete deadlines. It all comes back from like high school or university, college years, when you have like a big deadline to return your homework, but you're still gonna return it in the last night. So why not to take advantage of that? Instead, set like the deadline that you know is probably you're not gonna fit, but instead actually you will be much more productive to stay with that deadline, and then you will be more likely to actually return the work by the deadline. And you can use that hack with your team as well. If your developers tell you that the software is gonna take like a couple of months to develop the new feature, tell them, well, you have a couple of weeks. That's why with investors it's also important to set deadlines, because for them it's gonna take months or even a year or even more. But instead, set a deadline. But when you start your day, I advise you to start with the toughest task. Then the rest of the day is gonna flow easily. So that's why it's actually a good idea to go work out in the morning, because you're kind of like setting yourself for that mood right in the morning. So it's easier for you to stick with other tasks throughout the day. And a really cool tool to use here is Tower Matrix. So you have 4 quadrants. You have important stuff, and you have non-important stuff, you have urgent stuff and not urgent. So the first quadrant would be like the most important and the urgent thing that you need to take care of right now, so like as soon as possible. But if you keep doing those things constantly, you're kind of gonna burn out and you're kind of in crisis mode situation, so that is not good for you personally. But the ideal place would be like the second quadrant, where the things are still important but they're not urgent. Because if you stick with that second quadrant, you won't have like the crises in the first quadrant. So actually it's like ideal place to stick with the second quadrant. So just do things that are important, but do them on time. And the other 2 quadrants, the third and the fourth, are kind of like calls, emails, meetings. The fourth quadrant is about leisure time and just time wasting. You still need to have that to just like recharge so that you don't burn out, but still better to minimize those and to have full focus on the second quadrant. A thing that could really save you tons of energy is to stop talking about a thing that you want to do, but instead just focus on doing it. Because when you're talking about something, you're talking about the book that you want to write, or you're talking about the product you want to build. When you talk it for hours, your brain is gonna recognize it as you doing the work. So you're still using that energy that you could otherwise be putting into actually doing the thing. But when you've been talking about your company for hours, you're not gonna really feel on going and working about it, because, well, you already talked about it for hours, and your brain kind of registers that as the work done. So stop talking, go do stuff. And the final tip is very important, is to say no to perfectionism. because especially when you're a startup, you don't want to do things perfectly. When you develop your minimum viable product, your MVP, and you're trying to do it perfect, you're just wasting time, wasting money. Instead, if it does the job, then it's good enough, because perfect is so arbitrary. I actually really like the quote by one writer: perfect is not when there is no more to add, but when there is no more to take away.